Salut, c'est Shox de G2.
Okay, this is another episode of Talk to Thorin, and I'm here with hastr0 from Team EnVyUs, and I want to talk to him about the approach that his organization has taken to CSGO. So obviously, in esports, your team's background famously is Call of Duty, so it's over in console games. When we come to you picking up a CSGO team, you obviously picked up the team where, on paper, they were arguably the number one team, you know. This is when they just won the major when they were LDLC, and then the event right before you picked them up was the one they also won, MLGX Games Aspen. Presumably, though, you must have been in some sort of communication before that second event, though. So where was the team when you were sort of figuring out if you were going to pick them up or if they were the team to approach?
Yeah, we had been talking to teams for about 6 or 7 months prior to actually signing the team. And, it was just a whirlwind of conversations between different players and different teams. And we ultimately were able to work it out with LDLC to transfer the team to us. And we actually signed the contracts with the players the night the guys won the X Games gold medal. We could have signed the team before the X Games, but would have cost us a little bit more money on the transfer, so we decided not to do it at that point. Just let them go ahead and play out X Games with LDLC. And we'd been talking to teams for about 7 months, and I was really in communication with NBK at that time. So we just really found a fit, and a little bit of the rest is history.
So at the time you signed this team, like we say, already like a top team. So it's not like it was just an unknown team you were coming in and you were just hoping it all worked out. At the time, I remember you signed them to one of the best salaries, and it was like one of the best offers anyone had had. So at the time, people might naively have thought, oh, you're taking a big gamble here. But it was literally we're talking 2-3 months before the whole CS scene, especially in terms of salaries and stuff, just spiraled out of control, right? So was it fortuitous timing to be able to buy this team so early on?
I think I really do think as an organization we're one of the best at having some foresight in the industry in terms of what games are going to take off and what people want to see and what players and teams that are available that we can sign that would be the most advantageous for us. So yeah, I think we just had a lot of foresight in Counter-Strike, and I'd been watching Counter-Strike for years. And even though our organization got our start in console gaming, we were definitely paying attention to the PC scene, and we all played PC games, all of our staff. And yeah, I think we just had really good foresight into the industry. And then, about 3 months after we signed our team, there was a feeding frenzy for CSGO teams. So it was good timing.
When you hear, some of the salaries and some of the prices to buy teams as well in the summer onwards, that's when it really got really crazy, the market went ridiculous. In fact, obviously some people now claim it went to a level where it couldn't even be justified. I know that's what Reginald will tell you if you ask him about his TSM team. So how did you know, why get involved in CSGO at that point in time? What made CSGO the game to get involved in? Because like I say, you didn't just do it when everyone else was like, oh, it's the hot thing to do, get a team now. Yeah,
I went to ESL 1 Cologne 2014.
Yeah,
I think. Yeah. I think it was the final was Cloud9 and NiP, right?
It was
no.
That was the quarterfinals.
Yeah, that was quarterfinals. Yeah. It's Fnatic.
It was a classic game though.
Yeah. But the NiP Cloud9 match was actually a really good match to watch.
For sure.
If I remember right. So at that point we'd already been again talking to teams, but it was kind of the tipping point where I thought, all right, we have to get into this. They had a pretty good crowd there at Gamescom for that. And I just thought the Counter-Strike is making a comeback, and it seemed like it was just the right time for us to jump into that boat again, or to expand into that. And I just really liked what I was seeing out of the viewership on Twitch too at the time. Even though it was still small, I saw that it was growing. And then you add in the whole, skins component of the game, right? I thought that would actually boost the game a lot. And I just saw it growing. I was playing the game a lot myself, so I kind of figured that it would kind of take off a little bit.
So in some ways, in terms of people buying their first CSGO squad, the initial period had to almost be like a dream start, right? Like if you remember, a stat that I always kept track of that some people probably didn't notice initially was that your team just like never placed below top 4. I think it was like you had 14 events straight where they were top 4, and obviously won some events for second, top 4 otherwise. So you can't really ask for that much better to start out with, right?
No, I mean I think obviously that was the Fnatic Dynasty era, right?
Sure, yeah.
But I think we took it off of them for about 6 months, right? Like I think for about a period of 6 months, maybe give or take, maybe 4 to 6 months, we were the top team out there, and in terms of performance at LAN events, right? And so yeah, we couldn't have asked for better. I mean, the guys, even though a few of them aren't with us anymore, at least Nathan, who was with us back then. They, hats off to them, man. The players were just monstrous back then, and I still think that you'll see a resurgence of the French scene, whether that be with G2 or with our team now. I think you see the G2 lineup starting to do some nice things. I think it's taking our lineup a little bit longer just because, it's a different mix of players there. But yeah, I think it was a good time. I'll just put it that way. I was traveling with the team a lot. I was in Europe pretty much that whole entire 2015 with the guys and traveling around to the tournaments, and it was nice. There were a lot of wins.
So one of the things I kind of alluded to before, but to go into a bit more detail, one of the things that got really crazy in CSGO was because the market value was going up so much, and as a result, one of the ways people tempted the new teams they wanted to sign was just by offering them the highest salary of anyone, and then people kept topping that. I remember one of the really interesting approaches a lot of orgs took was they didn't just sit there and then let their players be like, well, sorry, we did sign you 6 months ago, so you have to wait 6 months, because that would obviously make some of those teams listen to some of those offers like, well, maybe we better like line up the next spot, So I know a lot of orgs actually were proactive, and they were like, right, let's just renegotiate these contracts, or let's figure out a way that we'll just pay you something closer to that so that you have no reason to think to go elsewhere if you're a winning team, if you're one of the best teams. Mm-hmm. Because if you think about like Fnatic, for example, they'd signed we're talking like 9 months before the feeding frenzies. They were in the worst spot, yet they were the number one team. Was this something you had to engage in yourself? Did you have to renegotiate things? Must have been tough in that respect, right?
Yeah, but I'll tell you this. I think, speaking of TSM, I don't know if it was Reggie or who came out and said when TSM signed the now Astralis team back then,
yes, they claimed they had the highest salary, right?
Yeah, that was a bunch of bullshit. That was a bunch of BS, because
turns out anyone can just make statements.
We never did. I mean, we've never done that. But to come out and say, oh, we pay our players the highest amount. But I'm saying now we were definitely paying our team, the most lucrative player contract in Counter-Strike, and we did the next year too. To be quite honest, there was nobody that made more than our Counter-Strike team in 2015, 2016, and that's just the way it is. And we kind of understood that, and now it's a little bit different. It's gone to another level in 2017. Sure, yes. But we're still up there, in terms of our average player salary on our team, and I think that it's something I think we can credit again our organization with, and I don't want to brag about it or anything. I don't think there's any room for that, but I think we do a good job of taking care of our players and making sure they're comfortable, and we kind of take a players first mentality with everything.
So one area that I really wanted to pick your brain on is exactly this, which is that I know that for the NA orgs and the orgs that came not just from like Call of Duty, obviously, because in Call of Duty, one thing I've noticed that I've been quite impressed by is how people have been able to get insane exposure when you consider that the actual game itself in the tournaments doesn't get as many views as some of the guys do on their vlogs. So however they've done it there, like hats off. But even the LCS orgs, they came in with this model, which was to some degrees in terms of exposure ahead of European orgs. Like they understood people like TSM in theory wanted to do content and stuff. And I know Cloud9 especially have been very good at getting streaming out of people, So I always tell people this, it doesn't actually matter if Cloud9's team wins. Someone like Shroud, as long as he puts in those streaming hours and hits those metrics, it's actually a very lucrative player to have on your team, even if it doesn't seem that way. So what I wanted to ask you was, how difficult was it in that sense to have a European team that is clearly one of the best in the world, but as far as I can tell, almost never engaged in this stuff? Like they weren't putting out loads of content. You didn't have vlogs all over the place. They weren't streaming all the time. So how did you make it work?
It's tough. It's tough. I would say, we didn't really make much money on the team at all. We actually probably lost money on our Counter-Strike team in 2016. I would say we definitely did. And a lot of that is it's a push-pull scenario. You want to push the players to do things like stream and promote your sponsors and things like that. But we honestly never put a lot of pressure on the guys on our team to do that, although we probably should a little bit more. However, again, we just want to win, right? So our organization is really based around winning. And I think it's important in the early, I still consider these the early years of esports organizations, right? I still consider this very much the second inning, if you will, if you're a baseball fan, or, basically the first quarter of a match. So I think we really just have that focus of we just want the team to be successful. We want to win tournaments. We want them to perform well. So we don't want to put the pressure on the players to do all these extra things outside of their time training and practicing as a team. And we allowed that to kind of flow freely. And I think the results kind of spoke for themselves back then. And, now where we find ourselves in a position, I would say now with this roster, where we're not the strongest lineup on paper, it's going to be very tough for us to go in and win tournaments without, the team just really significantly improving. Obviously we probably would apply more pressure to say, hey guys, you need to start streaming, but we really haven't done that quite yet. Somebody, for example, like Scream, he can log into a stream at any point and pull 20,000 concurrent viewers anytime he wants.
Sure,
and I've encouraged him to do it, but at the same time, I want them to focus on getting better still. I think we're still in that phase with this lineup where we just want them to improve. So we take that approach, and I think it's the right approach at this time. You want to build a winning tradition as an esports organization first. I think that's extremely important, and you look to the content second. But that's something, if you haven't noticed, if you check out our team's YouTube channel, it's growing very fast now, and we have a great content team that we hired on in the last 8 months, and they've been killing it, man, putting out really quality stuff for our fans to watch across the whole organization. So it's been good.
Was that a part, though, that made it tricky? Because, to a fan, if you're just succeeding in the tournaments, they think everything is great. This must be ideal. But I always tell people, if you're an org, you don't actually make the money off the tournaments. Like the players are getting a lot of prize money. That's another thing about the contracts, So you guys are trying to make your money by exposure time, which the sponsors want. And this is where obviously it's key, essentially, to try and have these guys doing that work. So when I had my talk with Reginald, this is a point that I thought you made, which was very fair, which was that eventually when the feeding frenzy really went to the next level, it didn't make any sense at that point in time to try and match those guys, because if his team was number one and he was having to give them all the time off the sponsor duties, to stay number one, like he was kind of in a bizarre, vicious circle where success almost took away money from his org. What would you say about that?
Yeah. I mean, I think it went against his policy, right? I mean, this is just my opinion. I assume that he looked at it and said, "Oh, we can't really monetize this very well," even though their team was, amazing. They had a great team. They were placing top 2, top 3 pretty consistently. And, I think that he just looked at it and said, these guys really don't bring a lot of exposure for our sponsors, don't really do a lot of streaming, not a lot of content built around them. The only thing that they can do is go out and win tournaments or get close to winning tournaments. And they made this decision to let them go based on that. And I don't think that that's a bad move. I think it's a very intelligent move, because at the end of the day, we're a business and you want to make money. I think we're just different in the sense that they had one kind of route that they wanted to take with their Counter-Strike team, and it didn't really work out to coincide with what their organization has done in the past. And with us, it was very much about just being competitive and winning, and so all was kind of good on our front. So it's just differences between the organizations and how they look to monetize and run their business. And for me, I think very much now in the future, I have a lot of pressure now as costs are rising, player salaries are rising. You want to build a bigger infrastructure, hire more people to support your teams, etc. I think now we are actually put in a position where we have to focus more on the content side now than we do necessarily on just letting players, live out their careers as just trying to be competitive. And now it's a whole lot more. It's a different ball game. There's a lot more to deliver to make money. So it's something you'll probably see us change in our own business practice.
While I realise that obviously CSGO is a very different circuit to games like League of Legends, for example, where you've got the set LCS season and you can figure out like very much when the guy is free and when he can do his streaming and when you can take him to a sponsor's office and do a shoot and all these things. Even if we take that caveat, it does seem like there is a disconnect though between the top European players, right? Like they still don't seem to understand that like if they want more salary, okay, true, there are companies that have come in who, for whatever reason, don't even seem to care about getting the money back and will just throw an insane amount at them. But at some point, if CSGO is going to be as big as some of these other games, don't the top pros, which at the moment, you know, nearly all are European, don't they have to like figure this part out, kind of what we've explained in the first half of the interview here, that, you know, there's a reason why those games aren't as lucrative as like NALCS, for example.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just tell a personal story about this. So, you know, way back when, some people that are watching might know this, I bet very few will, but I played Call of Duty professionally on the console, but I was, you know, a Major League Gaming pro, an MLG pro, right? And this is before Twitch even existed. I was streaming on Justin TV, right, and a couple other sites that you could stream on. And on Justin TV, I was kind of one of those first gamers to discover how to use like one of the Blackmagic Intensity Pro cards, so I could actually stream in HD. Okay. And I had a pretty good stream going, and I was like, you know, one of the first signed to Machinima, right? In the first, I think, 80 people that Machinima ever signed as content creators. So every time I posted a video on Machinima, it was getting like 300,000 views per video, right? And I never really focused on that. My mentality back then also was just focus on winning, you know, don't worry too much about putting out the content. Even though I was getting 1,000 to 2,000 concurrents on my stream, right? And again, that was before Twitch even existed, and I would say there were probably only about 6 or 7 active live gaming channels on Justin TV at any time. And it was a huge mistake after my career was over that I didn't do more of it, and I really regretted it, that I didn't monetize my own career more as a streamer / you know, YouTuber. It really, I think, hurt me in the long run. But so with that said, I think the players now that are in the scene, especially some of the European guys who don't really stream that much, I mean, I can't believe it, right? Like, if you're pulling 20,000 concurrents on average on your stream, the monetization that you can work on that is incredible. You know, you can basically match your player salary and prize winnings as a streamer if you stay consistent and do it, you know, 20 hours a week or 30 hours a week. So, you know, the fact that a lot of these guys don't take the opportunity to engage with the fan base and stream more and monetize that for themselves is mind-blowing to me. I really don't understand it. They'll regret it too. They'll really regret it when their careers are over. Yeah.
Does that make it tough to find a way, kind of in the vein of what we were talking about? Like if tomorrow you could sign one of the top 3 teams, you know, the Europeans tomorrow, would it make it tough to justify going up to the kind of the salaries and the ridiculous contracts that they have then, as a result of the fact that, you know, these people, they don't do their half of it in a way?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's a strain, you know, and I think, you know, I'll be candid about it. Like, you know, when we signed Scream to a deal, we signed him to a 2-year contract, and, you know, it was, I kind of had to say, like, a deal, listen, you got to do some stuff here. You got to stream, try to put in 20 hours a month, you know, and at least in your stream. And that's, you know, minimum. And you got to start doing things for yourself. Like, if you actually take a look at Scream's YouTube channel, it's insane, his average view count per video. And again, that's you can monetize that, and for his own sake, for his career, you know, he should be able to make money that way. But also, more importantly to me, is just engage with the fans and grow your fan base and really build your own brand. And I think he's done a pretty good job of that. I just think he could take a lot more advantage, and that goes for a lot of other players out there. Just about any famous Counter-Strike player, you know, you could go out and say the same for. So yeah, I think it's something we definitely want to push players to do, and I would encourage any player watching this that's on the professional scene right now, you know, go do it. Think about it more.
Because I mean, kind of to touch on what I said before, like when you look at some of the guys, like obviously like Optic Phase, some of these guys who come from the console games and the kind of social media followings they have on the YouTubes, like to give people like a number, I remember seeing like a big Call of Duty event that had like 100,000 viewers, and then people were like, "Wow, yeah, oh look, it's got like close to the most we've ever had," and I was like, "What? How can it have millions of subs and not, you know?" So it made me realize they've just maxed it out. They know exactly what they're doing. So in this respect, does it shock you still that CSGO can have we can break 1 million at a major, you know, and the whole scene in that sense is very underdeveloped, isn't it?
Yeah, but you know, with Call of Duty, it's like a much younger crowd. You know, like the phases and the optics, and I don't know. I think that their overall fan base is just a lot younger than you know, the teams who don't necessarily target that as much. I mean, there are a lot of factors. We're just an older organization altogether, anyway. Than those teams in terms of esports. And if you take a look at what they do, they definitely cater to a younger audience with their vlogs, right? I mean, you're not going to catch too many, you know, 35-year-old dudes like hanging out and watching one of their players in their bedroom with their dirty underwear on the floor, that like I've seen sometimes. You know, it's just now they've upped their game. Like that's changed. I'm talking, this is 3 years ago, you know, when they were vlogging a lot and built that fan base up. So, you know, I think at some point their fan base will get older, but that's really what I attribute it to. The Call of Duty console market is definitely not global. It's very much, you know, centralized in North America and a little bit of Europe, maybe a few other countries here and there. But you know, you're not going to find Korean Call of Duty Xbox players or PlayStation players watching Call of Duty esports. You know, it just doesn't happen. It's not a thing in Korea. So you know, I think that basically that younger generation of kind of vlog followers are what really sets their social media apart, and that's why you don't really see the huge viewership live numbers for esports as opposed to what those fans are interested in. That's, you know, those pro players kind of vlogging about their lives.
One thing that really surprised me was I never would have thought there would be like huge crossover from fan bases like this, like Call of Duty to Counter-Strike, you know, like obviously they're vaguely similar games, you know, but in general, if you have like a League of Legends team and you get a team in another game, not that many fans are going to hop over, you know, maybe like the loyalists who really like the brand, you know, but I just remember ESL Cologne last year when that screenshot got leaked where it was on one of the days of like the last 3 days or something where you could buy the stickers, and FaZe had gone out in the group stage, and this was before they had Carrigan and Nico and a really sick team, you know, and they were like number one by like double whatever the second was, and Optic again out of the group stage, way worse team than they have now. They were like fourth or something. Is there really this crossover market that you can have from those games to these ones?
Yeah, I think there are. I think Call of Duty, I think we played a big part in that, you know, bringing the Call of Duty crowd into Counter-Strike, and that might not be something Activision Blizzard wants to hear, but you know, that's the way it works, right? I mean, we were a Call of Duty traditional organization, and the only other game we had before we signed our Counter-Strike team was StarCraft, and when we signed a Counter-Strike team, we definitely saw the metrics in our social media. We saw Call of Duty console fans translating to Counter-Strike and moving on to play Counter-Strike on the PC because of our team. And, you know, a lot of people would comment in our social media that we were the reason they decided to download Counter-Strike and play it. And, yeah, I think that it kind of proved the model of esports teams being able to sell video games, market video games, right, for the publishers. And I saw a lot of it. We saw a lot of big crossover from our fans that were just watching our Call of Duty team, and then they came over to watch our Counter-Strike team.
So one thing that was actually one of the things I'd always want, like for this type of series, I like to have these kinds of discussions with the guys who are the owners, you know, because they can give me like what their philosophy was behind why they did the team and then the moves, etc. But one comment you made on Twitter that I thought was really intriguing, but you didn't expand on it, was there was a discussion going on about like what the value basically is of the different games and how they work out in terms of the market. And you made a really intriguing comment where you said that you could win 3 CSGO majors. So we think about that in terms of prize money, that's like $1.5 million, you know, obviously for the players is all great, but that wouldn't be worth as much as you would lose if your LCS team got relegated. Now, can you break some of that down for me? Can you explain how that could be possible?
Yeah, because let's break that down, and that's the juice right here in this conversation, isn't it? This is something I can kind of really explain. I think a lot of the fans out there of esports in general, or just Counter-Strike and League of Legends collectively,
Sure,
they don't understand this. Is that with Counter-Strike, there's not really a big market to sell a team to, okay? Or a very hungry market to sell a team to, because at the end of the day, if let's say we win 3 majors, sure, we take a very minimal prize cut from the players, right? So it doesn't move the needle at all. It doesn't pay their player salaries when they win prize money. It doesn't even get close. We're lucky in the course of a year of success, let's say 2016 or 2015, where we would pay 2 months of the player's salary based off the whole year's winnings of prize money. So the only way you can make money on that team is to basically sell some mega sponsorships, right?
yes,
Which is very tough, because you don't really have too many huge non-endemic brands, brands that are major corporations with global presences willing to invest in a somewhat violent game like Counter-Strike that they don't really know anything about, right? I think that's changing, but we're talking about in the past, or even the current climate, it's almost impossible to make money on a Counter-Strike team, right? Whereas with League of Legends, there's a very clear market for interested investors or people willing to purchase teams in the LCS. Okay. And so if we were to get relegated and lose our position in the LCS, we're losing our initial investment into the league, plus potential, gains from a sale of a team. Right. And so, I think that's what I was trying to explain. We're talking a few $1 million if we lose in relegations in League of Legends versus, winning 3 majors, and are we able to make $3 million off of a Counter-Strike team? And that's, the answer to that is absolutely not. I was probably actually being, I would say, a little lenient on that number. Probably go 2 years straight of winning majors and still not get it, to be quite honest. Not right now.
So then in that case, aside from liking Counter-Strike, wanting EnVyUs in Counter-Strike to have success and to win and these factors, is it tough to justify investing in a Counter-Strike versus something like League of Legends?
I wouldn't say it's tough, but you have to be very careful with the way you plan. And, I think most of the organizations right now with Counter-Strike teams are actually fine taking losses right now, if that makes sense. I think we're all collectively working together to make the ecosystem better for non-endemic sponsors, right? So where they feel like their money is safe. I think there've been a lot of deals in the past where, let's call it you have A list teams and organizations, you have B list, you have C lists, and a lot of those C list teams were actually successful in selling a couple of those non-endemic sponsorships, and they just don't deliver, right? A lot of misappropriation of non-endemic brand funds that came into the space, and when that happens, it kind of spreads. Everybody kind of learns about it. So I think there's been a little bit of shell shock from big brands that want to put money in, but I think that's changing now. I really think in the next 6 months that will change, and something like CSGO will actually become very profitable because it's an open ecosystem, et cetera, and you can sell sponsorships freely and do what you need to do to make money. But again, the franchise system or the relegation slot system, both are worth more money. They just are, and I think that's another reason why you saw us do the deal with Visa, with World Esports Association, is because we wanted a structure where you can actually monetize with a revenue sharing program, but also have some stability and a position that you can transfer to somebody else, right? As an organization that's worth money. And it kind of alleviated a little bit of the pressure that we had, where we're just kind of, putting money down a toilet drain, So, yeah, that's a little bit, if I explained it well, I hope I did.
So, I mean, one thing we've kind of come around to then is, once people have that realization that, okay, you maybe people are willing to take a loss now, I mean, as someone who knows a bit about League of Legends, an obvious reason why that is, despite the fact, obviously, the speculation has inflated it massively, part of it is League of Legends itself has run into a little bit of a bottleneck at the moment, which is called Riot hasn't implemented franchising. So I know that's one of the reasons why you heard a lot of industry people, a lot of people who have very successful LCS teams, saying all these positive things about Counter-Strike, even if, potentially you can be losing money, because the perception is, right, yes, it doesn't have the same infrastructure right now that can make the same money back, but because there just is no Riot, like Valve's not trying to do anything along those lines, the hope obviously is broadcast rights come in, there's maybe revenue sharing in that way. Do you think that has to come in soon for people to stick around? Like, does it have to be like the next 5 years for CS to have been worth it?
Yeah, I think so. I really do. For it to be sustainable for organizations, I think it absolutely has to change. There has to be some sort of stability, some sort of way to put a value on a team, right? And a meaningful value, one that investors or buyers can actually see that there's a model that they can monetize and have long-term return on their investment. And right now, I think there's you see a pretty good amount of turnover, I think, in the scene in terms of teams moving on to other organizations. I know that one, pretty firsthand.
Yeah, sure.
And it's a matter of what you're willing to pay, and what you're willing to fork out right now and take a loss on. So yeah, absolutely. I think there has to be some kind of formalization pretty soon here in the Counter-Strike scene for it to be sustainable. And I think that's where, it really hurt me, man, to read a lot of the comments from the community during that whole Visa transaction, because at the end of the day, it's not going to be perfect when it comes out. It's not going to be the most ideal scenario, but it's absolutely important to the sustainability of this thing as an esport long term, because once potential buyers or investors realize that this isn't a financial model that can yield a return, it's dead. It's absolutely dead. So if we didn't start that process then, we would be miles behind now. And yeah, it would be really tough to warrant us keeping a Counter-Strike team.
So that's the bizarre position the two games find themselves in relative to each other, is that obviously we don't have franchising yet in League of Legends. It looks like the steps are still going forwards, etc. And even if there was franchising, people still don't know yet, if there will be broadcast rights sales, like we've seen the initial ones happen in League of Legends. Will any of that go to teams? This is all, the problem with League of Legends is it's like the plan is there, but every step's going to be a battle in some ways. I'll just say a negotiation, however Riot want it to be phrased, Whereas in Counter-Strike, put it this way, if Counter-Strike gets this, if you get broadcast rights sales and revenue sharing, will Counter-Strike be bigger than League of Legends as a moneymaker, do you think?
It's tough to say. It's really tough to say. I think it's really dependent on the Asian market, to be honest, because and not just the Asian market, actually, League of Legends' presence globally is just bigger. It just is. It just is. However, the Counter-Strike fans show up, right? So the league fans certainly show up. But I think, the fact that the Asian market hasn't been developed in a large way in terms of viewership for Counter-Strike, it certainly hurts its value versus League of Legends. I think League of Legends is just a mile ahead of everyone in terms of that. However, with CS:GO, with that open kind of ecosystem for tournament providers, you see more frequency of LAN events, right, where you get to actually see the players live, and I think that really helps Counter-Strike to kind of close the gap on something like League of Legends.
So if you're saying in CS:GO this has to happen sooner or later, like especially for the longevity of the game make the game bigger, then in League of Legends, does franchising have to happen in LCS?
I think that I would say no, it doesn't have to happen. Obviously, it would be very advantageous to the organizations, and I actually think the league itself to franchise, because at that point you just bring in a lot more stability. It's actually much better for the players too, because the teams would be able to be more invested into their players, right? Knowing that, I just think player salaries would increase basically, if teams knew that there was no chance of getting relegated, the top end teams could go out and really fork out for the best talent. And a lot of fans would actually give the counter argument to that, where they'd say franchising is bad, owners would just kind of bring in mediocre players, etc. But they always forget that there are owners like me and many others that actually do like to win, right?
Sure,
and one of the KPIs, the key performance indicator here for us is that we want to win. And I think in all sports, it's like that. If you ask any professional sports team what their KPI is, and I think one NBA team told me it was 60% of it is winning, right? Or being competitive. So you always want to do that to grow your fan base and get sponsor exposure, et cetera. And I think franchising would just give a big boost over what, the current kind of relegation format has.
Are you, I won't say at ease, but have you kind of accepted that in CSGO especially, there are just these people who at the moment have like a faucet of money that they turn on and they don't seem to have to get any return in the short term, and then as such, those people can outspend everyone. That's at least the sense that people get, when you hear some of these salary figures that come out. I mean, those can't possibly be justified by any kind of business interest right now, right?
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. The players' salaries have basically tripled in the past year. They've gotten much higher. Let's put it that way. Maybe about 2x to 3x, right? So yeah, it's just tough to justify it in general. I think a lot of the teams are taking some really big risks right now, and again, I don't know how sustainable it is without some kind of formalization happening.
When you had the first lineup, I remember it was quite early. It was in like the spring when you did that move where you were getting that villa and you were having the players come out sometimes. Yeah. What was the thinking behind that? Because it seems like you did that to some degree, but it was never like a full on team house. Like what really was the plan behind that? And did it work out how you expected?
We ran into, it's a crazy story, but we ran into some issues actually there was flooding that happened in Nice.
Okay.
So the fiber internet that we were supposed to put in that place got stalled out, I don't know, 8 months, and everything moves slower in France, apparently. I'm American, shit happens really quickly here. And, okay. We were supposed to get really good fiber internet there, and it ended up, getting delayed 6 months, and it just became basically a fuck it deal. But our team did go there and practice a few times, and we actually, right before we won the major, we had a good week-long boot camp at the villa there in Nice, and I took the guys to probably to this day the best dinner I've ever had in Monaco. And so it had its advantages, and I wouldn't say it was a terrible venture for us, because I really do kind of attribute that boot camp and taking the guys around there and spending time with the team to us winning that major at DreamHack Cluj. But it didn't really go quite as expected, but I think it was just proof of the kind of investment we were willing to make for the players. I also think, let's be honest, I'll be honest about it. I think the players were quite lazy about not going there to practice and train.
Okay.
Yeah. Even though, it was a beautiful villa, you could see the ocean, had a crazy swimming pool. It was double gated, really private. They just didn't take advantage of it. They were a little lazy in terms of setting up boot camps there.
Okay. So, when you say there, when we won the major, as I outlined before, the team you picked up had won the major only a couple of months before, And so, listen, in theory, you could say, oh, my team's a major winning team, etc. But I feel like it has to be that scenario where, the old joke that if you have an adopted kid, then if they hit a home run and you're like, that's my boy, kind of. It's like a Seinfeld joke, I think. Okay. But it's different if they win a major when they're actually your team, right?
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, it was, I think we finished, so that first year we finished, this is 2015, we finished fourth at Katowice.
Katowice, yeah.
Or top four, Katowice. Yeah. Then we went into ESL1 Cologne, had that crazy heartbreaker in the final after we had that first dust too. I'll never forget that. So we placed second there to Fnatic. And then, then we went on to win that Cluj major. And before, when they were as LDLC, I was watching these guys and I was like, all right, these, they had a little bit of fire in them. They were playing extremely well, and it was nice to to watch them play Counter-Strike at the time when they were LDLC. I enjoyed watching their games, but I mean, it's a whole nother world when, you know, they're part of your organization. You have something to do with it, with their success. And I think we actually did give them a little bit more of a springboard, and kept the team together, obviously, as long as we could. None of the team changes, I'll say this, that we made, I agreed with. Okay. So, you know, I think a lot of people out there need to understand that, you know, don't send tweets to our team Twitter saying, you know, why the hell did you drop this player, or why did you make this decision? You almost always have to blame the players on the team for that. It's always a mutiny. Okay. It's always,
especially in the French scene.
Oh man. It's rough right there. There's some major, drama there between the French players at times. So, you know, when they come to you as a team owner or manager, and they come to the organization and say, we want to make this change. It's like super, you know, cloaked, and, you know, there's somebody who's getting, you know, it's like the Grim Reaper comes, and usually that Grim Reaper is one of the players on the team. So somebody always gets the axe. And, you know, the day we cut Shocks and Smiths from the team, that was brutal, man. I did everything I could to keep it together, try to keep the guys playing together, but it just didn't work out. Obviously, it ended up being a good decision, but then, you know, things kind of changed a little bit.
You never know in that scenario, do you?
Shortly after, and then the Green Reaper showed up again, you know? So, yeah.
Okay, so that's something I wanted to ask about, because obviously, with all your success in the console games over in NA, you're working with people with, you know, it's your own culture, especially in those games. You really grew up in those games, you know, so you knew all the people and what the dynamics are like. And as much as, listen, all the EnVyUs guys speak English and they all know a bit about, like, American culture, it's a bit of a culture shock, right? Like, when you're saying here, like, just to give people context, one of the things I found very shocking when I got to know the French CSGO players, because the thing is, in 1.6, France wasn't really there because they were playing Source, actually. So I didn't know a lot of these guys. And the thing I had to learn that was very bizarre about them is they've got like it's not that they're two-faced, because it's not that they secretly hate each other or like each other, but they can exist on like two levels at once, where the same guys who, when you talk to them privately, you know, one of them will be like, oh, that guy hates that guy. You see them in person and they're like, they do that French thing where they kiss, they're having wine together, they're having a great time. It's real hard to get a gauge on what's actually going on with these guys, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you hit it right on the head right there. I mean, I would never call them two-faced or say that it's like, you know, some negative thing. It's just the way they work. It's just, you know, they can be very friendly with each other and almost like brother-like, right? Like, sure, like they've known each other for years. They played with each other for years. They can be like brothers, but when it comes down to business, it's a business thing and it's a personal thing, and they certainly separate the two. Let's just put it that way. And I don't think that that's a terrible thing. I think they really do honestly care about winning so much. The French players do, which I appreciate. That they are willing to, you know, put a knife in their brother's back to win, you know, and that's just the way it is. And to be quite honest, I mean, I think that's why a lot of the players have had success, and you've always seen a French team, at least one of them, at the top level. In most cases, there have been two French teams, you know, ranked in the top 10 in Counter-Strike. So I think that that's a big reason that you see that.
So you kind of alluded to it already, but as an owner, when it's purely a personal thing, that means a roster move has to happen. It's got to kill you as an owner to be like, so we have to give Shocks away to the other team who was our rival now. We have to do that, do we? But as you're saying, when these players, especially the French players, when their mind is set to it, by the time they really come to you with like, this is the move, it's like that's the move at that point, right? There's no turning back, right? You can't get them together and change their minds.
No, man. Or the best example of that, oh man, if you go back and watch ESWC Montreal,
sure, yeah.
Basically, Shocks and Smiths were kicked the night before we had to play Cloud9. Okay,
wasn't a very good game, that was it?
Oh my god! You know, that was honestly, you want to talk about, you know, clown fiestas. That was the ultimate fiesta of Counter-Strike. I honestly, I'd never seen a team so disjointed in a match. Like, basically all 5 players claimed that they were trying their hearts out, but they just weren't communicating at all. You had like,
I remember the game. The one to watch is go and watch the cobblestone map. That one was nuts.
Yeah, somebody bought like a, an auto sniper on T side cobblestone, was like running around just like spraying through the, like they were just like, it was literally like Happy's calls were like rush A, rush B. It was like they just ran at the bomb sites, and Cloud9 like, ended up winning that match. And it was, at the time, we should have demolished Cloud9 all day long, right? So it was pretty disheartening. Like we should have won that tournament, but it is what it is. And I think that's a great example of the way that scene works.
So when you had to let Shox go, I know, especially you personally, you'd really put in a lot of work actually to have a relationship with Shox. Like, I mean, when people talk about his like mercurial nature, especially the EnVyUs era, this was the era where he could be like an amazing player, but he also could be a player who, I mean, could be lazy or could just go to excess in other areas, So you put in this time getting a relationship with him, and then you have to see him go away. Did it kill you then to see that in G2, basically, they usurped your team and they became number one after you'd had to kind of give him up?
Yeah, even though it was very brief that G2 had the advantage over us. Sure. I mean, they didn't really, right? The second we made that move and we let go of Shox and Smiths, just have to clarify, we went and won like 6 of the next 8 tournaments.
Sure, but I mean, eventually the tide turned again,
Yeah, but not for long. It wasn't. Yeah, I mean, sure, but they weren't winning tournaments, right? It was a little bit different. We had already we banged out like a series of 9 tournament wins or something along those lines, and G2 maybe won 1, right? So but there was a period where we were just kind of in the dumps. But yeah, I mean, I did create a relationship with Richard, and like I had really good times with him and Eddie. Smith was like really close to me too. Like I shed a tear when we had to cut them. I'm no joke. I mean, I get a little emotional sometimes. It sucked, and yeah, I mean, I spent a lot of time with the guys, and they were like brothers to me, and I was learning their culture and getting to know them more. It's actually a funny story I got for you. The night before we played the quarterfinal at Katowice, right? I was like jet lagged, couldn't sleep, and Richard was like, let's go out, right? And I was like, come on, man. He's like, you got to play tomorrow, right? You got to play. And I'm kind of a, I like to think one of the more hip owners. So he's like, no. He's like, trust me. He's like, I will kill them all tomorrow. Let's go out. And so it's like, I find myself in this like Polish, like rave nightclub with Shox at like 4 a.m. I walk in this place and I'm like, 30 years old. So it's not really that interesting to me. You walk in, it's one of those places where the music's just like bop, 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 and like laser lights everywhere and stuff. And Shox is like dancing all over the dance floor, He's like, basically like, I'll kill them all. Not in those words, but stuff I can't repeat tomorrow. And of course, he went in the next day and didn't play all that well. He played well, but like we didn't win. And it was one of those moments where I was just like, fuck it. It was a good time, right? Like I had fun just watching Richard have a good time and enjoy himself. And I think that's part of the game. It's kind of early in the esports life cycle. And as an organization, you don't find that in professional sports. You probably won't find, Jerry Jones going out with, Tony Romo at the nightclub, at 4 a.m. before they have a match the next day. It just doesn't happen. But so, yeah, I mean, I had really personal relationships with them and having, had a good time and not really bitter over anything that's happened in the scene. I think it's just part of the progression of, the players and their careers, and I think they're certainly getting more serious about it now.
While I realize in NA, and especially in like console games, that there has been a lot of drama and there have been teammates who didn't get along and all the rest of it, one thing that's always been a bit bizarre to me about the French scene is that I could understand if people didn't get along and that player was playing badly. Like in that scenario, I don't have any problem with someone cutting them, but wasn't it a bit bizarre coming into the French scene in that respect, that sometimes they'll even cut a player who probably plays better together with them than whoever they might replace sometimes. They can be a bit bizarre in that sense, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it was one of the situations with with the first transaction where we let go of Shox and Smiths. I mean, a lot of people were basically saying, oh, well, Smiths and Shox left because they were like a duo. Yeah. And I really think it was just that the team just wasn't getting along. They just didn't want to play with Shox at that point anymore. And I think they just didn't want to play with Eddie either. I think, it was more like mentality and attitude issues amongst the team. And, and that's normal, man. It happens all the time. These guys have egos, they have personalities, and they also just don't see eye to eye in the way that they play the game. And sometimes it's just very strategic based, right? So that's what led to make our team making that move, and the other three players just couldn't handle it anymore. So that's what kind of made the change happen.
So in 2016, where for a lot of the year EnVyUs had disastrous results. I mean, the majors obviously, like, this is night and day compared to what you were used to in the past. Every player I've even spoken to from that team can't give me a good reason as to why. Like all of them, I know quite a few of them well. So from month to month, you'd be talking to them. They'd all have like something like, oh, we're going to try this. And then, no, this player is going to change position. And then, oh, now this guy needs to be the in-game leader. They tried every single thing, but there was something about that team that just never worked. What do you think the issue was?
I think we paid them too much. I honestly do. I think we gave them such a big contract that they just got complacent. I really do. I think some of them weren't playing the game enough and putting in the hours and the time outside of practice, right? Like they all showed up to practice, but a couple players were putting in extra hours and extra time in, really trying to win. And I think, a couple of the other players, maybe a few, just didn't put in the time. And outside of team practice and showed up, just kind of went through the motions. When you this is a big problem in esports actually. When you sign a player with a lot of notoriety and a lot of past experience and history, and you award him with a big contract, in many cases those players get extremely complacent, and they just don't put in the same level of effort that they did before, and they're not as hungry, if that makes sense. And so it's very tough to make decisions now, as an owner, because you have to find a player that's always going to be hungry, no matter how much money he's making or no matter how much success he's had in the past. I've always admired players like, somebody like Olaf Meister, right? I've always admired him because he just always seems to come out and try to play his best. And he's always pissed off if he's losing, no matter how much money he's making, right? And I mean, I think there are players like that on our team, but I just don't know if they've maintained that consistency of being hungry to win. And so I think that our team was a victim of that last year, to be honest, to be very candid.
So obviously the whole concept that there would be another French shuffle, and included in the next one was this idea that there would be a super team. So someone was going to get the better end of the deal. That was clearly something which was being discussed months before it happened. I mean, even before literal negotiations had ever happened. If that's out there in the community, and by that time, both G2 and EnVyUs were both having like lackluster results, for some of the star players they had. Was it tough to know that essentially, unless things turned around massively, that at some point you were going to have to cross that bridge, right? Yeah,
I mean, I think when we were negotiating with the team, and I'll try to be honest about as much of this as I can be, I think, I think we kind of wanted to keep the core team in place. I kind of ended up moving to G2, but we were also extremely fine with what we ended up with. Okay.
Okay. So
given the current state of the way things have gone, I would say we got the better end of the deal. But that's not to say that doesn't change and G2 goes on to win many tournaments. I mean, I think they're starting to pick it up. They're starting to play extremely well. But at the same time, they're to warrant the amount of money those guys are getting paid, and I won't disclose figures or anything, they're really going to have to win some tournaments for G2, and G2 is really going to have to step up monetizing against that team to make it worthwhile. And, I think that we just got to a point where, we might have had some miscommunication too about how we wanted to go about re-signing the team. But at the end of the day, everything was broken, in the French scene. So, we kind of ended up getting what we got and went the route of taking care of the players that we have now, and we've put a lot into them, and I think we're extremely happy. We really are. I mean, I wouldn't say that we're happy with the way our LAN results have gone, but at the same time, I'm very happy with the personalities and the players that we have on our team, and really proud to be supporting them. So, I think we would have been happy either way. but just because the way the French scene is, they're basically two really defined teams, and I think even LDLC now is a really strong contender to be an up and coming team. Just the way things shake up, who knows what can happen with these three teams. So yeah, we're happy, but at the same time, it was definitely a strenuous process trying to figure out what team we were going to end up with.
While I get that a lot of the players, aren't as sophisticated, let's say, when it comes to a lot of these business matters to really know like how the mechanisms of an organization work and how orgs really make their money and what that investment's about. And while obviously at the same degree, I can't blame them that they get as much salaries as they do, because it's like that old thing. What's something worth? It's worth what someone will pay for it. So to them, yes, it's fine, right? This is what I did for a year. I had a contract with you. You paid me this. Great. Okay. Someone's going to offer me more, workers' rights. I can move elsewhere if I want. That all sounds fine from the player's perspective. But if you're the owner, and as we've mentioned many times in this discussion, you invested a lot into these guys. As we said, to some degree, you forewent what could have been organization winnings to try and have the team win more. If you're a guy who's sitting and you've I've got 3 of the potential super team members, you've got 2, and I've got this relationship with them, it has to burn you a bit that those guys didn't do more to try and stay in EnVyUs, right? Do you think they really understood what you'd invested in that respect?
Yeah, but again, I mean, you can't. So yeah, we invested a lot into those players for a couple of them for more than a year, and we paid them a good amount of money to play Counter-Strike. They had a great deal on, the revenue from stickers and percentage of the prize money that they made and all that. And they made a lot of money. We didn't make very much money. And then you end up where you develop those players' brands and really help them out and help to build them. Although it's a give and take, like they helped us as well. Yeah. But you provided all these things for them, built up their brand, and had this relationship with them where it's terminated pretty quickly and they move on to another team. And I think that's something that you can't really bypass with short-term contracts. And I think that's why most esports organizations are kind of demanding, 2-year or longer contracts now, because they've been burned in the past by players who didn't really have any kind of loyalty to their organization. They really just are in it to do what's best for them. And at the same time, you can't really blame them for that, can you?
Sure. I mean, yeah, obviously very short careers, and very young guys as well. Not necessarily, right, as I said, very sophisticated. It's not that they're idiots; they just don't have a very sophisticated outlook on how the whole ecosystem has to operate.
Yeah, I mean, you at the end of the day, if you give somebody an opportunity to really only worry about themselves, they're going to only worry about themselves. And I'm not saying that the players are selfish, really, but they definitely have an outlook where they want to win, and they'll do whatever it takes to win. If that means shuffling teams, and they'll also, look out for themselves. And again, I say it's not necessarily wrong, but people have to understand that it's very tough running an organization when you're dealing with players who have that kind of mindset.
So another factor about the last shuffle is that, yes, okay, some of these players wanted to play with shocks, for example. Some of them wanted to just try something new. These are all valid factors. But there does seem to be an undercurrent that part of it also was, we also don't want to play with Happy. That did seem to be an element of it. I didn't really ever hear him discussed in he'll be on the super team and stuff. Where does it stand in terms of, what do you think of Happy at the moment? It seems like he's had some kind of philosophical digression from those other players he was with in the past, even though, as we've said, he captained them to 2 majors, how do you see Happy at the moment?
I think Vincent is really trying to rediscover the game. I think that's really the issue right now. I think back when we were winning all these large string of tournaments, and he was guiding the team back then. I think he had just a really good knack for the game, and he was just ahead of everybody. Okay.
Sure.
He was one step ahead of all the other in-game leaders, minus Pronax, right? And I think what happened was he didn't really innovate too much or continue to change the game, and everyone else caught up. And I think that's normal. And in any esports life cycle, the best time for me to watch an esport is in its first couple of years, right? And that's because that's where you really see the creativity and the hard work pay off, right? where you see ingenuity, creativity, you see a lot of time put into the game, and those teams that spend that extra amount of time are going to win. They're going to be just better than the other teams who don't put in the work and don't do any discovery or try new things or create different strategies. And now CSGO has been out for 4 years, maybe longer, 5 years almost. So now every team kind of understands the ins and outs. There are only so many boosts that you can learn, right? There are only so many smokes, so many flashes, and so many coordinated plays that you can come up with. And I think a lot of teams have learned that and kind of grabbed from the older players who, or the more successful players back in the day. They kind of learned all these tricks from, right? And all these different angles, etc. So there's only so much that you could innovate with, and I think that the whole scene has kind of caught up, and that's why you see a lot of teams actually finding a lot more success now. It's very tight, right? Whereas you had 4, maybe 5 organizations that were competing for that major championship. Now, I mean, legitimately, almost all 16 teams in a major could potentially win. I would say we're probably up to about 12 to 14 teams now that can go into a major, and you just don't know who's going to win it, which is great as a fan, great to watch, but as a team, it makes it very tough, and as a player, it makes it very tough because you're going in versus competition that's pretty much on an equal playing field, as you know.
So why stay in the French scene then? If you lost some of these players over some of the bigger names, obviously, why not just say, okay, I had my time in the French scene, it was great. Now we're going to go somewhere else. We're going to get a different team, whatever region that might be in. What was the reasoning for staying?
One, I think it was a little bit of comfort. Right, it was just easier to transition into the French scene because we obviously had a relationship with some of the players there, so that helped, and we had an infrastructure with our manager Jordan, who's amazing, who keeps the team going, and there's a little bit of comfort there, a little bit of ease to get into it. Plus, let's be honest. I mean, if we were to come to the NA scene, which could create some ease for us. If we come to the NA scene, we probably wouldn't grab a lineup that would be competitive on the global stage. It'd be tough, right? It would just be murky waters. So I think the safer bet for us, if we're going to put our money into Counter-Strike, was just to stick with the team that has potential to win tournaments, and I think that's what we got out of it.
Okay. So when people look now and they see EnVyUs as an org in CSGO, I noticed for the last year or so, whenever I saw on Twitter, you talked about EnVyUs as an overall organization. You were always hyping the angle of like, we're the most successful right now, we're in the most games, winning the most titles, In CSGO, obviously, right now, that's not the case. That was the case a couple of years ago.
No, so it's not really the case.
You kind of built your identity.
No.
Sure,
Yeah.
but you kind of built that as the identity the last couple of years. I mean, let's say someone like Optic, we have the most fans or whatever, or FaZe, we have the best social media, whatever. If that's the identity, is it important that it gets there quickly in EnVyUs? Is the CSGO division, does it have to happen basically immediately?
No, I mean, I think we've built, like I said, that's why it's important. I'm reiterating that it's important to create a winning tradition because when you don't have those wins coming, it's something that you can at least fall back on as a brand and say, like, look, we're working, tell your fan base, like, we're working to get back there. It might take some time, but we know how to do it, right? This is something we've proven that we can do. So yeah, like across our whole organization, I would say like maybe the past 6 months we haven't had nearly as many wins coming in. However, that's kind of changing again now. I mean, our Halo team just won, the last HCS tournament this past weekend. Our Overwatch team is kind of back at a level that they had been previously where they were winning everything. And our Call of Duty team are defending world champions, etc. So yeah, I mean, last year, I think there was no doubt in the industry that in terms of winning and being competitive, there's nobody that got even close to us in terms of winning multiple championships across multiple game titles in esports. And I think, to answer your question, I think it's just something that's nice for us to be able to fall back on. And I think, if I had to say to our fans, we know how to do it and we'll get back there. And I'm confident in that, although it's becoming increasingly difficult to win multiple championships across multiple games. It's tough. It's really, really difficult to do. That's why I think last year was an incredible year for us. I don't know if I honestly don't know if any esports organization can match that in years to come. We'll see.
Okay, so at the end of the interview, do you have anyone you want to thank or say hello to?
Well, we talked a lot about our Counter-Strike team, so I'm going to say one big thank you to every player on our CSGO club, because they are working hard. They're boot camping right now in France at the ESL offices there. They had a boot camp just a month ago. They're working extremely hard. They qualified for EPL finals in Dallas, which is nice. That was a really tough match that they had to go in and win against Astralis the other day to make it there. So I just wanted to thank them. This is kind of what the interview's been about. So thanks to the players on our team. And we're enjoying watching them play every day.
Welcome, everybody. Blessed are those that visit this channel and enjoy the content here.